Hello, I'm Tom Wilkinson, and welcome to the Thinking in English podcast, a podcast aimed at intermediate to advanced level English learners. On today's episode, I want to talk about conversations and how to have better ones. English learners often really want to start having conversations in English, but at the same time can be nervous and anxious. Don't worry though. If you follow the tips in this episode, you will be having conversations like a professional in no time. But first, why not follow the Thinking in English Instagram page? Thinking in English podcast, or the link is in the description. And you definitely should look at our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog, for all transcripts and bonus content. Here is today's vocabulary list. As always, the written list is available in the description of the podcast and also on our blog, thinkinginenglish.blog. Light-hearted. Light-hearted. If something is light-hearted, it is happy and not serious. For example, we had a fairly light-hearted discussion. Anxiety. Anxiety. Anxiety is an uncomfortable feeling of nervousness or worry about something that is happening or might happen in the future. Children normally feel a lot of anxiety about their first day at school. Awkward. Awkward. Embarrassed or nervous. For example, he seemed a little awkward when I first met him. Favour. Favour. A favour is a kind action that you do for someone else. For instance, could you do me a favour? Would you feed my cat this weekend? Uncomfortable. Uncomfortable. Not feeling comfortable and pleasant, or not making you feel comfortable and pleasant. For instance, the boy looked uncomfortable and out of place among the adults. Interaction. Interaction. An interaction is an occasion where two or more people or things communicate with each other. For example, language games are usually intended to encourage student interaction. Curious. Curious. If you are curious, you are interested in learning about people or the things around you. For example, babies are curious about everything around them. And finally, naturally. Naturally. Having an ability or characteristic from birth. For example, he's naturally funny. He doesn't even have to try. Conversations are such an important part of our daily lives. Whether they are professional conversations in your workplace, light-hearted conversations with your friends in a restaurant, deep conversations about your feelings and emotions with your partner, or even small talk with the person making your morning coffee. Barely a day will go by without you having some kind of conversation. Nevertheless, this does not mean that talking to people is easy, especially when you are talking to someone new. Furthermore, I know this topic is something that often causes language learners anxiety and stress. Talking to other learners or native speakers is one of the best ways to practice your knowledge and improve your skills. You might also work or live in an English-speaking environment, in which case you need to have conversations in English. Or you are studying by talking to an online tutor like myself, and hoping to learn while talking. Whatever situation you are in, conversations are important. However, conversations can also be terrifying when you have to speak a foreign language. I know this from personal experience. There have been so many occasions when I have tried to talk in Japanese, only to be nervous about my lack of vocabulary and grammar. I'm also an English tutor. Sometimes new students struggle to have a conversation the first time we meet. Even though their English level is often excellent, the first time can be awkward, and it is often down to me as the tutor to lead the conversation. Think about the last conversation you had with someone in English. Was it boring? Was it awkward? Were there any long periods of silence? Did you find the topic interesting? Did you enjoy talking with the other person? Are you good at having conversations? Often, every time an English learner talks to a stranger for the first time, the conversations are very similar and maybe a little boring. How are you? Where do you come from? What do you do? If you find these topics interesting, great. Keep asking that kind of question. On the other hand, if you want to have different, interesting, and unique conversations, then keep on listening. Why is talking to new people so hard? One of the main reasons is that you don't know what to expect. Compared to talking with your mum, friends, or partner, you are not used to the way the other person communicates. When talking to new people, we start to think about all of the bad or awkward things that could happen. They might talk too much. We might talk too much. They might get bored. We might get bored. They might stop talking to me. There might be a long silence. They might want something from us, like money, a favor, or even a date. Despite this, conversations are good for us. Even awkward or uncomfortable conversations have some benefits. Studies have shown that simply chatting to someone on the train or in line at a coffee shop can make you happier for the rest of the day. Of course, there are some people who are more social and more outgoing, and others who are less social and less outgoing. We can talk about extroverts and introverts. An extrovert is an outgoing and socially confident person. An introvert is a shy and reticent person. Are you an introvert or are you an extrovert? Regardless of your answer, we all need social interaction, even introverts. Conversations are good for everyone. How can you actually be better at talking to strangers? Well, I'm now going to give you a few tips I found during my research for this episode. Not only will they be useful for when you try to talk in English, they will also be useful for conversations in your native language. Whether it's talking to an online tutor for the first time, meeting a potential language exchange partner, or just sharing a word with a stranger at the bar, these tips should help you. So, tip number 1, be brave and try not to worry. I remember my first day at graduate school in London. Only about 1 hour after I had moved into my new accommodation, I saw on Facebook that a group of fellow students, or fellow new students, were meeting for a drink in a pub close to my apartment. So I decided to go along myself. However, when I arrived, everyone was already sitting down and chatting, and there were no free chairs. I spent 10 minutes standing at the bar by myself, holding a pint of beer, and I nearly left. I felt really uncomfortable and nervous. What if they didn't like me? What if they thought I was rude joining in their conversations? Or what if I ruined their conversations? But in the end, I realized I had to be brave, stop worrying, and just go over and introduce myself. In this situation, everyone was new. Everyone was just meeting each other. And in fact, the first 3 people I talked to are still 3 of my closest friends today. You should do the same. Even if it's uncomfortable, be brave and just do it. Just go for it. You will probably enjoy the conversation and experience more than you think. Tip number 2, be curious. You shouldn't be scared to ask questions. Be curious. People who ask more questions are normally better conversation partners than people who don't ask questions. Asking questions can start a new conversation or keep an existing one going. For instance, try asking why they came to the event you attended. Or ask about something they are wearing. Ask about something they are doing. Tip number 3. Be creative. Now, this is related to the previous tip about asking questions. For example, what do you do? Where do you live? How old are you? To be honest, these are boring questions. Everyone asks these questions. Everyone has answered these questions before. Instead, ask a question that will make the other person think and hopefully start a great conversation. Maybe something specific about what they have already told you. Or maybe you can start with a statement. Something like, that watch looks really cool. Or, the coffee shop is really crowded today. Statements like this invite others to respond to you and share their own thoughts. But regardless of a question or a statement, just be honest and authentic. Be the real you when you are talking. Tip 4. Give a compliment. If you say nice things or give a compliment to another person, it will make them feel great. Everyone has anxieties and stress when we are talking to new people. We think too much. Complimenting your conversation partner will move the focus to them and help you get past difficult or awkward times. However, be careful with your compliments. A compliment which might be acceptable in your culture or with a close friend might be completely unacceptable in another situation, culture, or to a stranger. If you want to be safe, stay away from complimenting someone else's appearance or physical characteristics. Instead, say something nice about their accent, their opinions, or their experiences. Talk about something you both like or are interested in. This is the next tip. You should try to talk about something you have in common. Maybe you're from the same place. Maybe you both know the same person. Maybe you have similar hobbies. Maybe you work in the same industry. If you can't think of anything, you are likely in the same place and experiencing the same weather. There's always something you have in common, always something you can both talk about. For example, many of my students from Japan, Taiwan, and Korea like to talk about my experiences in their countries for the first few classes, because it is something that we can both talk about comfortably. I've lived in Japan and Taiwan, and I've visited Korea on vacation, so I can answer some questions and ask those people some questions as well. Talk to more new people. The more new people you talk to, the better you will get at conversations. And the more good conversations you will have. You'll be able to ask better questions and respond with more interesting answers. New people are also often happy to talk to you. We are naturally polite people, and we are almost always happy to have a conversation if it is started by someone else. Think about it. When was the last time someone wanted to have a conversation with you and you said no? I don't think I've ever said no to a conversation, or at least it's very rare. Maybe that conversation won't be long and it won't be deep or detailed, but people will talk to you. And the final tip, don't let mistakes or awkward moments stop you. Conversations often start awkwardly. You don't know each other, and the other person is probably trying to work out if you are weird or normal. However, once it's obvious that you are just a normal, friendly person, the conversation will start to improve. For language learners, we are often worried and embarrassed about our mistakes. If you are stressing about making mistakes, or stressing about if the other person thinks your English is bad, then you are probably not thinking about the conversation. Remember, people are normally nice and friendly. And if you are talking to a native speaker, they will probably be impressed that you are trying to communicate in a foreign language. I come from the UK. It's actually quite rare here for people to speak two languages. So when they speak to a foreign language speaker, people here are normally quite impressed, and they're quite happy you're making the effort to speak to us. So here is today's final thought. This episode of Thinking in English has looked at how to have better conversations. Conversations are excellent things, but they can cause English learners and language learners in general a lot of stress. If you are brave, creative, and confident, you are probably going to be an excellent conversationalist. Have you ever had a conversation in English? Who was it with? What did you talk about? Was it a good conversation? Was it interesting or boring? Comfortable or uncomfortable? Would you do anything different next time? And if you don't have a conversation partner, don't worry. There are lots of language exchange social media sites and applications, meetups in major cities, and other kinds of networking events that allow English learners to have conversations. In the past, I've used apps to meet language partners. I've been to meetups in a pub in London and at a beach in Japan, and have meetings at the Japanese embassy even to allow me to practice my Japanese. There's always options out there for you to have a conversation with someone. And I think take every opportunity you can. That's my final piece of advice. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Thinking in English. Please share with your friends, check out our social media links in the description, and send us a message. We really appreciate all of your feedback. And if you have any ideas for topics or future podcast guests or any other learning format, please let us know. And please leave me a rating. We're now on Instagram. I'm sure you've already seen it, but go there, check it out. Lots of good content about vocabulary, pronunciation, and grammar. And Instagram is a great way to contact me. It's Thinking in English Podcast on Instagram, or the link is in the description. Also, all of the transcripts of the podcast are now available on the Thinking in English blog. Vocabulary list, comprehension questions, and all of the articles are there for you to read. That link is also in the description, so please check it out too. Thank you, and see you next time.